what just came out from the CENTCOM reported that the U.S. Central Command announced that the United States forces carried out strikes against Iranian missile and drone storage sites, as well as coastal radar facilities in response to yesterday's Iranian attack on the Singapore flagged cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. And from the Iranian side, so far we haven't learned anything. There is no announcement. There is something going on in the media that is the Iranian response. They're going to attack as soon as possible, but that's not right. No announcement so far, no reaction from the Iranian side so far. And it was reported by CNN that, all these Arab states in the Persian Gulf are preparing for the Iranian attack. They're talking about Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. What's so amazing to me that the United States is not reacting to what's going on in Lebanon. And because what was happening in the Strait of Hormuz basically was related to what's going on in Lebanon and the new arrangement in the Strait of Hormuz that Iran was trying to manage that. And how do you see the situation right now, Tony?
Well, Iran has not violated any tenets of this memorandum of understanding. Rather, they are enforcing the components therein that the United States and Iran have both agreed to. Well, on the other hand, the United States and Israel completely ignore and act as if Lebanon is no part of this agreement when it clearly is. Just yesterday, when Marco Rubio, or day before yesterday, when Marco Rubio met with the U.S. ambassador or the ambassador from Lebanon in the United States, along with Israeli representatives, talked about this framework or this peace agreement, another framework, right? Another plan to peace between the United States and another nation, which the United States has yet to uphold its end of the agreement in either case, both in Iran and now with this case in Lebanon, or anything that we've seen in Gaza at all, was to address. And while that meeting was going on, Israel is conducting strikes in southern Lebanon, like as that discussion was ongoing. So when you look at the MOU, the first and foremost principled point of this entire framework to proceed in any discussion or negotiated settlements in any way, in the other 13 points of it, has to do with the immediate and permanent halt of war on all fronts, to include Lebanon, and that the United States and its allies will respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Lebanon. It specifically says Lebanon. So the aspect of continued aggression, continued occupation, continued military strikes, small or large, in Lebanon violates that entire tenet of this agreement. So when you look at further down the list at point number 5, that particularly talks about the Strait of Hormuz, that upon signing of the MOU, obviously that's been done, the Islamic Republic of Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman, and vice versa. The traffic of commercial vessels will immediately start, in considering the need for removing the technical and military obstacles. That's any type of instructions, hey, stop, don't go, any type of mines, etc., within 30 days. So if we look at this in terms of the 30-day and the 60-day window of what Iran and the United States agreed to, particularly with the Strait of Hormuz, none of that is enforceable or is I guess handed over or agreed upon until point number 1 of this entire agreement is met. We recall last week when Iranian officials were going to meet with U.S. officials in Switzerland, and Israel bombed Lebanon, and Iran made it clear we're not going to proceed in this negotiation with you if you haven't even met principle 1. We need guarantees. And then there was this discussion of a ceasefire. For a whole 24-hour period, Israel refrained from bombing, and the Iranian contingent arrives, and then Donald Trump threatens to kill the negotiators before they even make it home. So again, Iran's like, well, that violates the point number one explicitly. So what we're clearly seeing is that in this negotiation, which is also reflected in U.S.-led negotiations for Lebanon and Israel, in U.S.-led negotiations or the peace deal for Gaza, is that the United States cannot be trusted. The United States brings no diplomatic credibility to the table and cannot be trusted. Case in point being exactly what we're seeing with Lebanon and Israel, particularly Israel against Lebanon, and Iran holding accountability to it, saying, hey, this whole, hey, world, check it out. The Strait of Hormuz, we dictate how you can traverse. It says we can't charge a toll for the first 60 days. And within the first 30 days, we're going to remove obstacles to moving through it. But we, Iran, dictate where, in which channel you move, how you move. And Iran gave very specific instruction. Any vessels transiting in or out will use this part of the channel. The entire navigable channel of the Strait of Hormuz, it's not the entirety of the strait. It's a portion of it. So imagine traffic lanes on a highway, and you have a construction worker that's directing when you can come, when you have to stop because of oncoming traffic, right? So Iran has imposed themselves as the administrative control and has put out to everyone, this is the navigable traffic lane you will use. And then in the midst of the United States clearly continuing to violate the agreement, Iran said, oh, okay, stop. We're not going on to point 5 with the Strait of Hormuz. We're not going on to talk about nuclear enrichment or not doing nuclear enrichment or whatever the case may be. We're not going to talk about X, Y, and Z until we figure out and we have guarantees for A, B, and C. A being war in Lebanon. So this Singapore flagged vessel traveled outside of the dictated channel. So you have now a vessel violating these administrative protocols that Iran has put forth. Were they influenced to do that? Were they told to do 9 actors involved in doing that? I don't know. Was it just a lost captain or maybe someone that doesn't understand instructions? Maybe. But Iran must respond. And they're responding in accordance with this memorandum of understanding. They haven't violated any tenets of it. So it's no surprise and it's no coincidence to me that just 2 days ago, the United States has approved this $1.5 trillion defense budget, along with a 89 billion with a B billion budget reconciliation package, meaning all this money we spent on the war that was never part of last year's budget has to be reconciled in this year's budget, meaning we need more money. You have 2 options. Here's the budget, pay for all the stuff you did out of your budget, or you have to ask for more. The Department of Defense came back and asked for more. And if you look at what's associated in that $89 billion reconciliation increase to the 2027 NDAA, the 1.5 trillion, which now puts it well over 2 trillion, is the replenishment specifically of wartime stocks in the Central Command Theater. Basically, restocking for war. So it's clear to me that the United States has once again used negotiation to simply protect themselves while they rearm for conflict. Have the naval forces from the United States Central Command and United States Navy Central left the area of responsibility? No, they haven't. Have we met all of the accords in terms of U.S. troops leaving the region entirely? No, we haven't. So to me, this simply looks like the Trump administration using the peace dividend of negotiations to rearm, restock, to go back to war, and using any Iranian action as pretense to do so, while completely ignoring the fact that you have Iran saying, hey, Lebanon, you're not abiding by that at all. And yet Israel and the United States don't even acknowledge it. and won't even discuss it, won't even talk about it, as if if it's not even a consideration. So I think that this MOU was fragile from the beginning. The hard work of this, and we've talked about this before, the hard work begins in actually implementing it. And we haven't implemented any part of it. I mean, so it looks to me like with this, the continued strikes in Lebanon, Iran holding the United States to the accords of the MOU, the United States responding to kinetic strikes on Iran directly, we're simply going right back into the precipitant of escalated conflict, kinetic conflict. It looks clear to me that that is the road we are on.
Yeah. Here is what was reported on Iranian media, Tony. It says that it was 2 U.S. missiles hit a telecommunication tower in the Syriac area. The Syriac area, you see here in the Strait of Hormuz, and Syriac area is here. This is the strait here, and Syriac is here. Like, yeah, this is the area that was hit by the 2 missiles. And when it comes to what's going on, I think in the coming hours we're going to have the Iranian response. They're going to basically, from the Iranian behavior that I have witnessed so far, they're going to assess which country was used for this attack, which bases were used. These fighter jets came from Saudi Arabia, maybe Jordan, far away from Jordan and they're going to hit the targets there. Let's see. So far, we haven't seen any sort of announcement on the part of Iranians, but this IRIB, this is a state media, they reported that 2 missiles hit the Syriac area. And this is what's going on. I think, Tony, one of the problems right now is that the United States is trying to manipulate the region politically. We had Marco Rubio coming to the region, to Bahrain, Kuwait, and UAE, to try to convince them to put pressure on Oman. Then we had some sort of announcement from one of the Omani officials. We don't know who was that. He said, we're not going to charge anybody who uses the strait. Then we've seen Bloomberg reporting that Omani government was communicating with Europeans that each and everybody who wants to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, they have to pay the fee. So you see different voices. They're somehow politically they're manipulating the region. And this is part of the game that the United States is playing with Iran. And that's why you see IRGC coming out, because not only because of this strait, but the case of Lebanon, as you've mentioned. These are 2 complicated situations and are coming together. I think there is no understanding between the 2 sides, and at least they're not getting to the point to understand each other's position.
The United States, both politically and militarily, are shaping conditions to go back into a shooting war, kinetic war with Iran, to try to redo, if you will, an ending for another attempt at a win. This agreement, this 14-point MOU, was handedly an Iranian victory. And so now the United States is looking at ways to manipulate the region through diplomacy or threats or whatever types of leverage the United States is attempting to use on other Gulf Coast nations, and all for the purposes of rebuilding or at least reestablishing some sort of basis of coalition, or at least basis of manipulation to then conduct strikes against Iran into next military movement. And again, the area that you just pointed out where these strikes happened in near Sarik and Sarik Island, the IRGC's 2nd Division headquarters of the IRGC Navy and the Iranian Navy are located there. So the Strait of Hormuz is specifically an area within the Iranian construct of command and control, where the IRGC have a component of control and the Iranian Navy have a component of control. And Sirik is one of those locations, but also an area of communication. So why again do we see, where you just pointed out there, if you look at the strait here, why again do we see, and this is a map from that we used from 3 weeks ago talking about this, where those strikes are circled. Again, we're seeing that concentration of strikes in that area on the Gulf of Oman side, if you will, of the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran does possess absolute ability to control physically, militarily that region, that spot. And it's basically from Bandar Abbas down the coastline, Sadiq, and in there you've got the, that point of Kashem Island, and then you have Hormuz Island. So we know that just below that, basically where Sadiq is, parallel to that, is where the U.S. had its distant blockade kind of in that area. And in north of that into the strait is where the United States was attempting to try to regain or gain some type of physical control to take that control away from Iran. And now what we see is the United States is going right back to targeting those exact same areas. So the question then again is why? So if we're looking at now what Iranians' potential calculated response is, okay, where did these strikes come from? Who supported it? Where did they emanate? What nation helped them either in launching or whatever the case may be? Because if we're going to respond militarily, it makes sense to respond specifically to where that emanated from as a response. And I think the Iranian response will show that it's a very specific, coordinated response to, we're responding to this specifically because of this. Well, the United States continues to go into every opportunity to fire missiles or fire upon Iran with going right back to striking in the same spot again. There's a reason for that. The United States is attempting to stack the cards, rearm, and go back into a kinetic war with Iran to try to reset the conditions or better conditions in this MOU. Because in terms of the U.S. position, though it is the best the U.S. can hope to get, it's still a disaster for Donald Trump and the rhetoric of why we went to this war. It's a disaster. So I think that this is an attempt to go at it again, so to speak. And I think that Iran's response is coming, and that it will be very focused, and it will be proportional, and it will be in direct response to the strikes that were conducted against the sovereign territory of Iran over the last 24 hours. So I think we're going to see an Iranian response.